welcome and introductions, a very light touch of housekeeping, and then the bulk of our session is going to be about the introduction to Census, the census itself, Somali data from Census 2021, including the analysis that was published in October, and of course questions, as we've said, welcome them throughout, but also some time at the end. So just before we kick off the housekeeping, if you haven't worked with myself or our team before, my name's Emily and I'm the Deputy Head of Outreach and Engagement here at ONS, and I'm basically here to work with all of our wonderful stakeholders and help you be involved and engaged with anything that you'd like to be across ONS, and also for me to think about what might be interested for you and try and find opportunities and ways of working together. And I also have on the line two lovely colleagues from our data topic areas. So I'll just hand over really briefly to Cara and then to Wusu to just introduce themselves, if that's all right. So morning, Cara.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Cara and I work on the ethnicity, identity, language and religion team. And our team have been publishing the small population kind of publications over the last couple of months. So yeah, I'll hand you over to Wusu, who's been working on these as well.
Yeah, hi, my name's Wusu, and I've been working on the same team as Cara as senior research officer. So I'm one of the people who did the data analysis for the Somali article and helped write it up. So yeah, happy to be here and presenting it for you.
Brilliant. Thank you both. So as we said, happy to take questions throughout, have time at the end for them too. We will share these slides with the Council of Somali Organisations after the session, so you'll be able to get a hold of them. And because of that, where possible, we've also included links in the slides so that when you receive a copy, you'll be able to head straight through to the things that we're talking about after the session. So I'll get started then. So a brief introduction to the census. If you've come to any of our presentations before, some of this may be familiar to you, but if not, we just want to give you a little bit of a background and some context so you can see where the data that we're talking about has come from. So what's the census? Well, it's a survey that happens every 10 years and everybody in England and Wales takes part. And the Office for National Statistics, or ONS in shorthand, is responsible for that census in England and Wales, and there are other organisations that do it in Scotland and Northern Ireland. The census is super important because it gives us the most detailed population data that we currently collect. We do have other kind of methods and areas that we collect population data in, but the census is one of the biggest and most detailed opportunities because we ask everybody to take part rather than sampling small sections of the population. And Northern Ireland held their own census at the same time as us, and Scotland was not this year but last year in 2022, and the last census we held was in 2021. So why do we do this? Well, as we've mentioned, it provides us with really detailed population information, and organisations, including the government but not limited to them, use that information to shape policy, allocate resources, plan services and monitor equality. And the reason I stress the point that it's not just the government is because this data is free for everybody to use. Once we publish the data, it's a public resource, and so charities, businesses, individuals and private persons can use this data. So it really can help everybody do what they want to do in the data space. So what things can the data help with? What makes it so important, and why is it something that you guys or folks out there in the Somali community might want to be using? So the census data can help us to do all sorts of things because of that level of detail and how it cuts across the whole population. So for example, you might want to understand more about education in your area. So with the census data, you'll be able to look at the age group of people and their qualification levels in a particular location. We even have a mapping tool that allows you to visualize that information. And then once you add other characteristics, for example, like ethnic group, or for example, you could be adding something like the number of cars they have in their household where they live, you start to build a picture of who the people are, and then you can start to understand elements about them that relate to education. Equally, you might be doing something, for example, like putting together a language school for young people from the Somali community, and you might want to understand more about how many people are in your area, and you can use then that data to kind of put together an understanding of the population and what size of resource you might need to cover your aim and your education project. And the same happens across all the other topics on screen here. So healthcare, again, if we understand who is where, healthcare providers can better allocate their services. Same with housing, building companies will look at the data to understand where new developments will be most beneficial. And all sorts of public services, even local authorities will be looking at this sort of data to even decide how to put their bin routes together, because once they understand who's where, they can much better make sure the services fit around people's needs. And the same for transport, if you need a new bus stop. Census data will probably be involved in that decision in some way, shape or form. So there's lots and lots of things that you can do with it, and on both a grand scale for the whole population and on a smaller scale for individual groups and organisations. So a couple of facts about the recent census, where the data that we're talking about today came from. So census day was on the 21st of March 2021. The reason we have a day is because collectively what we ask people to do is consider when they're filling out their census form the situation in their household on that day, meaning there is a window to fill it out, but we ask you to think about, if you're not doing it on the 21st of March, what was the situation in your household on that day? So it tries to provide a snapshot of the population at that time. For the first time, this was an online first census. There was a paper option, but what it meant is that we approached all of the households asking people to collect to give the information online rather than for a paper form as the first option. And we also focused on engaging with everybody to make sure that everyone could take part. So we had lots of services, we had lots of materials, products and support systems in place to try and make sure everybody felt able to do the census. And through that work, we worked a lot with all sorts of different community groups and different populations. And we had some wonderful staff working for us out in the field who were recruited with Somali language skills so they could come and work with members of your community. You may or may not have met them. I hope that you did, and if you did, I hope you had a great time working with them. And they were really there, kind of doing what we do in my team, but on a much smaller scale, trying to just kind of open those data doors, as we like to call them, to everybody, and make sure that people feel they could understand what was happening and take part in it. So the census is really important, as we talked about, but what happens once we've taken the data? So after we've collected that census data, we have to clean and process it. So we anonymize it, we make sure that it's, plain and simple bucket of data that's not going to identify anybody. And then we have to get it ready to publish into what we call outputs, which is the physical things that we produce as data and the various products around them for everybody to use. And that's really where the data begins to hold its value. So I mentioned keeping your data safe. So before we publish any of our statistics, we make sure that they don't include any personal information. So if you think back to filling out your census form, almost imagine kind of cutting your name off the top of it, and then the data gets poured into a big bucket, and no one could know that it's you after that point. We do a number of sometimes complicated statistical things to protect you, and there's examples of them listed on the screen. So there's things called record swapping, which protects people and households with unique or unusual characteristics by moving things around slightly. These things don't detract from the data. What they do is it just makes it harder when you give out small amounts of data for people to unpick and figure something out in reality by looking at, for example, a map to see, try and figure anyone out if they've got a particular set of characteristics. There's other things called key cell perturbation and disclosure checks, but effectively all that we do is, before we release any data, we always make sure that nobody can be identified, and in fact, if people could be identified, we wouldn't release it. So you might think our directive is to put data out there in the world, but our directive actually is to keep data safe, and then once it's safe, we'll put it out there for people to use. So what did we do then once we made this data ready? We've released all the census data in various phases. So our first phase was about putting out the headline counts and estimates of the population, so the really big numbers, how many people are there in England and Wales, how many males, how many females, and so on. And then we followed up with a further wave of more detailed univariate data. Univariate data just means one variable, so it's one item of data effectively with numbers, so that we can start to see some of the more detailed categories. So when this slide deck comes around after the session, all of the blue highlights that you can see on the screen are links, and you'll be able to click through to those locations. But some of the things that we produced included things called unrounded data, so that's where we give out specific numbers. Supporting information, that's where we provide commentary and bulletins to try and help make the data a bit more understandable. Univariate data covering 8 topics. This is our topic summaries, as you can see mentioned on screen, and I'll talk about more about them in just a moment. But we had 8 kind of core themes and topics across the census piece. Statistical bulletins with a bit of detail, kind of giving commentary and life to some of those numbers. So you could either get hold of the physical data itself, or you could look at a statistical bulletin which kind of gave you in words some of the key headlines from that data. We also produce various interactive products, so mapping tools, quizzes, profile tools, etc. So you can start to build different dashboards of the data that's important to you. And all of those tools are still live on the Census on the ONS website, sorry. So you can still use all of them now. So I mentioned topic summaries. A topic summary is a set of data and supporting commentary grouped by a similar theme. So we've published a variety of topic summaries back in 2022 and early 23. And I mentioned them because the ethnic group, national identity, language and religion topic summary did include some Somali figures. There'll be something, if you've come to any presentations we've done on this topic before, that you may remember talking about. Later in phase 2, we got more detailed information being published. So we got into some of the more complicated topics like subnational and multivariate data. And what that means is basically smaller geographies, so lower than national, and multivariate, so more than one variable. So more than one item was kind of cross-referenced in the data that we were publishing, and across all sorts of topics. And with all of these things, we had our supporting information, so analysis, information about how we put the data together, the statistical bulletins, which give you that commentary through it, and then all the interactive content to make it a bit more fun and interesting. And then we've released phase 3 now as well. So Cara mentioned earlier small populations data. So that's a term that we use to talk about groups that are defined by cultural or other backgrounds. And within this, there is further Somali data, and that was published on, so small populations data sets were published on the 25th of September this year on a website called Nomis. But we've also had other smaller data releases around things like detailed migration statistics, origin, destination or flow data, and that's about how people move from one location to another. So we're getting into quite kind of minute detail here. And as you can see, there's a theme in the way that we release the data. We're able to start with the really big numbers, and then we can get more and more detailed as we go down. And you'll see that's important because it's allowed us to come to the point that we've done this analysis specifically about Somali populations, which hopefully will be really helpful for you. And that's a great segue into the final piece here, which is, as well as all of the physical data products, we have had an analysis program running across all the topic areas. And as I've mentioned, the Somali analysis that we're going to be talking about in a bit more detail today is part of this program. But we've got analysis of all sorts of different topics. So if there's anything you're interested in out there may well be some census analysis on it, and that should give you some really good commentary and a bit of a kind of starting to piece some of the picture together beyond the plain numbers, as well as providing extra data sets to support that piece of work. So where is some of this data, some of the earlier publications? Well, to start with, it's important to think about when you want to know where some of the data is, you've always got to approach ONS data thinking, where would that data have come from? Where are people going to be answering questions that provide me with the type of data that I'm looking for? So it's important to know from the perspective of looking up Somali data in particular, that there's a couple of places that people might have identified. So this is a suite of questions that the team, so Cara and Rusu, have been working around, and you can see that there are some places within these suites of questions around topics like ethnicity, national identity, religion and language that certain characteristics of the Somali community might come through. So it just gives you a sense of some of the identity characteristics and identity questions within the census topic. So I mentioned that we had Somali data published before this analysis, and this slide here just gives you some of the information. So we mentioned topic summary, and I've got some of the high-level information on screen here. And we've also got in a snapshot of an example of what the ethnic group question looks like on the paper questionnaire, but the same structure was what you would have experienced on the online questionnaire. So the key thing to remember is that there's 5 overarching topics, 5 overarching categories within the question. So I think it's Asian, white, black, other, mixed. And then within that, you answer a further question with further detailing and tick boxes, and the option to always identify a more specific answer in any of those areas as well. So I mentioned the small population data. I've also got a brief slide to let you know how you can get to that data too. So the small populations data, as I mentioned, was released on the 25th of September, and it's about groups defined by their characteristics, for example, ethnic group, religion, national identity. This is available on a website called NOMIS. So it's a website run by a university, but carries some of the ONS data. And I do believe there's some 2011 census data on there as well. And the small population data from a Somali population perspective, we produced breakdowns by sex and 5-year age group across national, country, region and local tier authority, so LTLA levels, that's the geographies. And it was across Somali ethnicity and Somalia as the country of birth. And I've just got a screenshot on the page in front of you of what the website looks like, and the links that I've provided on this slide will take you straight through to the NOMIS website, so you can take a look at that data in your own time. So now I'm going to hand over to Usu to talk about the census analysis that was most recently published and that he knows an awful lot about. So I'll hand over to you, Usu. I'll just stop sharing and Usu will pick up and reshare the screen for you.
All right, thank you. All right, hopefully everyone can see that now. So yeah,
Yep.
just going to talk about the census analysis. So yeah, just start off with what the analysis actually is. So on the 4th of October, we published a bespoke article looking into the Somali group. And yeah, this article is online on the ONS page. So it's just an article with a lot of graphs and figures, and it goes over different topic areas, giving details about the Somali group in England and Wales in comparison to the overall population of England and Wales. Yep, like I said, it covers different topics. So it covers 10 topics, including age and sex, country of birth, education, health, homelessness, housing, labour market, language, living arrangements, and unpaid care. So these topics we worked with various Somali groups to get an idea of sort of which topics they're most interested in, and we made sure to include them in some way in the article. So hopefully everyone's happy with the topics that were covered in the article itself. All right, so in terms of data sets, if you wanted to work with a data set, they're available alongside the article to download very easily. So you could use the data set to recreate percentages that you found in the article, or you could use them to make your own graphs, your own charts around any of the topics that we covered in the article itself. And you can even download just the underlying table. So all of the data on a specific topic, for example, if you want to download all the tables around age and sex, or you could download a table that we use to create the graphics in the article itself. So I'll just demonstrate that to you now, how this all works. So here you can see the article itself, and you scroll down. Just an FYI, if we make any corrections to the article, you can see notice here that we put here. And if you want to go back to previous version, then you can do that here. We scroll down here, we can see the table of contents, so you can quickly go to any of the different topics that you're interested in. But just for now, if we wanted to download the data that's related to maybe sex and age, then we just come over here, click on this button, view all data using this article. We click on that. And that brings us to this page right here. And this just lists out and links to all the different data downloads for the different topics. So we've got age and sex, country of birth, education, and so on. So if we just wanted to download the age and sex one, we're clicking it right here. And again, there's a notice up top. If we make any changes to any of the tables, then you can see what we made the changes to right here. For now, just scroll down and tell you about the data set. And you can just click to download it right here. Yeah, we've got that, so that we can open it. And just like that, we have access to all the tables related to age and sex from the Somali article. So to start off here, just to give a brief overview of how to navigate these tables. They all have the same layout, and so it'd be easy to jump from one topic to another. And the layout is hopefully very straightforward, so if I just go over quickly, then those hopefully make sense to everyone. So to start off here, we've got the cover page to give you some basic information, the title of what the tables are related to, when it's published, link back to the article, any contact details down here. And then we move on to the contents tab. It will just give you a list of all the different tables that are in this Excel. So let's go over different topics. So you can see we've got links to all the different tabs. So we've got notes tab, definitions, and then we've got each of the tables are listed here individually. So we know that the Somali 01 tab will link to Somali identity through the different ways people can identify Somali. Number 2, Somali identity across different geographical areas. Number 3, so on and so forth. So if we want to take a look at a specific table, for example, we want to look at Somali identity by age, we can click through here and go to straight to the table, or we can just click here. So it's really just up to you. So whichever way is easier. All right, and now that we're on here, it just gives you sort of an idea of we're working with up here. So we got the title of the table. Just lets you know that worksheets only contains one table. And yeah, we've got some notes up top here, just to give an idea of the shorthand that we use in the table. So for the region LTLA, just refers to low tail authority. And then here we use C inside of square brackets to notify that we've suppressed account due to a low number of responses. So like Emily was saying earlier, we put things in place just to make sure that we're keeping the data confidential and that we're not disclosing anyone's identity through our release. So the disclosure we used in this article, in this research, is called the 10-5 rule. So basically, we suppress any counts below 10 and round all the remaining counts to the nearest 10, to the nearest 5. So you can see here the counts, for example, England and Wales count overall, age 0 to 4. You can see that everything's rounded to nearest 5, all of the different counts. And then if I just try to find the suppressed count, you can see here we've got the symbol here. Just shows that the count was very low for Somali in this area. So we suppressed them just to make sure they're not disclosing anyone's private identity. All right, and overall top here, it just gives you the column headings to give you an idea of what each column contains. So we've got the area type. So this table is different areas. So we've got national overall, so that'd be the overall for England and Wales. Then we've got country, so it'll be a breakdown of England or Wales. And then it'll be regions, so different regions in England and Wales. And then we've got LTLA, which goes down to really small levels to look at individual cities in England and Wales. Then, yep, let's go area name. Then for this example, we've got age here, we've got the different groups. So the way that it's split up is we've got overall population count for England and Wales, and then you got the count for Somali. So when you want to read the table to make sure you're understanding which of the groups that you're looking into. And then here we've got the count. So different for us to count for age and group. So yeah, it's fairly easy to read and work with. So if you wanted to, you can really, once you download this, you also play with, so you can really customize it any way you want to. So for example, you just want to maybe filter, and just say you're only interested in looking at region, and you only care about looking at a specific region. So you only want to look into London, for example, and then you can customize it even further if you want to. So it just is like a really easy way to customize the data and look into exactly what your needs are. So yeah, that's just like a brief overview of how to work with the data download. So hopefully that all makes sense. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a shout now, or yeah, let me know. Hopefully that makes sense, everyone. And then quickly go back to the table. We've got a figure here. So if you wanted to look into this data as well, just literally click here, download figure data 1. Right here's downloaded. And here's just the data we used to make that that figure. So if you see a figure, if it's just taking you want to know more about it, look into the details, then yeah, just download the data and look into it again. And again, we use square instead of a square bracket to suppress any counts that are below 10, just to maintain anonymity for everyone. All right, so that's a brief overview of the article and how to work with the different data sets. So like I said, yeah, it's easy to work with and it's really yours to play with once you download it, and just use it any way you want to, really. All right, so now moving on to findings from the analysis. All right, so if we start off and look at demographics, so we can see that 176,000 user and residents in England and Wales identified as Somali. So that's 0.3% of the population. So yeah, it's a fairly small population, but it's sizable still. And the large cluster of that Somali group lived in London, so 62.4%. So the large majority of the Somali group in England and Wales live in London. And if we look further into the Somali group, the breakdown by sex, you see that female was 53.9% versus male at 46.1%. So this is in comparison to the overall population of England and Wales, which was 51% female and 49% male. So the breakdowns are fairly similar. And just so you know, when I say overall population of England and Wales, that includes everyone in England and Wales, including the Somali group as well. So just the overall population. Yeah, and in terms of age, the Somali group was younger than the overall population as well. So you can see here on the right with figure 3, there's age broken down by female and male. So the purple and the sort of green bar chart to show the age distribution across sex, and we have the lines for comparison as well. So you can see the purple line represents England and Wales. So yeah, you can see the bottom here, there's big spikes for both purple and green, show that the Somali group has overall younger age populations than England and Wales. All right, and in terms of language, the most common main language for the Somali group was English at 67.8%, followed by Somali at 28.6%. And specifically for language, we filtered it so we looked at individuals who were aged 4 years and over. So you'll need to bear that in mind if you're looking at the data and you want to compare it to other data sources. If the counts don't match up, we had our own ways of filtering the data. So for certain topics, we'll filter it. So maybe so for labor market, for example, we filtered it by age 16 and 64 just to get the working age population. So when you're comparing the data, you just want to keep that in mind. And all of the filtering, all of that is listed in the article, and it's listed as notes in the data download as well, so it'll be easy to find. All right, if we go back to language again, 74% could speak English very well or well. And then if we look at country of birth, so for the Somali group, 43.5 were born in England, and 43.1 were born in Somalia. And also for the Somali group, Wales was the ninth most common country of birth at 0.5%. All right, so next up, in terms of health, 66.2% of the Somali group reported having very good health, 9% of the Somali group reported being disabled, and then 6.2% of the Somali group provided unpaid care. So these high numbers for very good health and low numbers for reporting being disabled is to be expected because the Somali group is has a low age overall, so you'd expect them to be in good health. All right, now moving on to employment and occupation. So 21% of the Somali group was, 21% of the Somali economically inactive groups were students. So basically economically inactive just means that the person is not employed or self-employed, and they're not currently looking for a job. So if they are a student, for example, then they'll be categorized as economically inactive. And if we look at figure 6, we can see a figure breakdown of employment in comparison to England, Wales, and the Somali group. So you can see for the Somali group, the majority are in the economically inactive group, but a large part of that is because the low age population, so a lot of the people in this economically inactive group are students. So you can see that it's higher than the economically inactive for England and Wales. And yeah, down here you can see the student bar is very high for economically inactive. And you can see this this is the percentage for England and Wales. So you see it's a lot higher than England and Wales. And then with figure 7, we can look at the most common occupations. So the most common occupation for the Somali group, about 22.1%, was caring, leisure, and other service occupations, and elementary occupations. So you can see here, if we look at the figure again, we can see in comparison to the percentage for England and Wales, it's a lot higher. So the Somali group really tends to work in these areas right here. All right, so next up, if we move on to housing. So 72% of the Somali group lived in social rented accommodation. And yeah, you can see in figure 8, the comparison between the Somali group and England and Wales. So you can see that the Somali group really tended to live in socially rented accommodation a lot more than the England and Wales group overall. And then after that, next was privately rented, and then the level of ownership was a lot lower compared to the overall population. And then 49% of the Somali group lived in flats, maisonettes, or apartments. So yeah, almost half of people who identified as Somali lived in that type of accommodation. And again, if you look at figure 9, you can see the bar chart here. And you see with the black bar that the percentage for England and Wales is a lot more the Somali group that live in flats versus the England and Wales overall population. All right, so next up we have housing. Again. All right, so single family couple households was the most common living arrangement for the Somali group at 37.7%. And 58.8% of the Somali group lived in overcrowded housing. 0.7% of the Somali group lived in the HMO. So HMO is a house in multiple occupancy. So it's a property rented out by at least 3 people who are not from one household. So not, for example, not part of the same family, but they share facilities like bathrooms and kitchens. And then 0.07% of the Somali group reported living in a homeless shelter. All right, and if we look at figure 10, we can see the ratings for overcrowding, undercrowding. So if we look at Somali, there's a lot higher rates of overcrowding overall compared to the overall England and Wales population. All right, and then next up. And also, if you look at the percentage for the Somali group living in homeless shelter, we have to keep in mind when the census took place. So the census was sent out and filled in during the pandemic. So this could affect the numbers reported for the groups in homeless shelters as well. So just have to bear that in mind. And then in terms of homeless shelters, for the overall population, it was 0.02% that lived in reported living in homeless shelter. So the rates are really similar between Somali group and overall population, which is fairly low. All right, next up we look at qualifications. So 26.9% of the Somali group had no qualifications. This tended to increase with age. And 23.9% of the Somali group had level 4 qualifications. And this was higher at younger ages. So if we compare that to the overall population, so in terms of no qualifications, the overall population, it was 18.2%. And in terms of level 4 qualifications for the overall population, it was 33.8%. And if you look to the right here at this figure, you can see that low qualifications is really low at younger ages and tends to increase at older ages. And then you can see that level 4 qualifications starts out really high at younger ages and tends to drop down. This is to be expected because a lot of the younger demographic will be students that are in university, so they're working on getting their degrees, whereas the other population most likely just won't have a degree, which is a similar trend that we see with overall population in England and Wales. So starts out low and then gets higher overall, and same trend here as well. All right, and that's everything in terms of all different topics. So yeah, now it's time for questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to let us know.
Thanks, Lucy. That was really comprehensive. Of course, what Lucy's kindly done is taken a lot of the kind of key findings from the article itself. So there'll be more detail in the publication that we're talking about. But Kahir, please do come in with a question.
No, it's not a question, but more of like, can we have a demonstration of how to use the toolkit to generate some specific data, let's say for Bristol area?
So like how
or
to look at the data sets
Yeah.
that are available to look at a particular location.
Yes, let's take Bristol for one.
Sure. Can we look at an example? Is there a good example to show with that? Lucy.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, again, so to come back to Asian demographics. Okay, so let's say we wanted to look at the age of the Somali community in Bristol. So again, we can just we use the one. Yeah, come back here, and we're going to want to take off all these filters. All right, so we go back to just the baseline of the default where it will start off. So if we want to look at a specific city like Bristol, for example, we come over here to area type, and we can make sure that it's filtered, click off, select all, and want to work with LTLA because this is where we can get into really specific and see cities. So click on that, and that's okay. Okay, now we've got all the LTLAs, so we've got all the cities in England and Wales, and we specifically want to look at Bristol. We can come here to area name, click here, and we've got the whole list right here. But just to keep it easy, we can just search for it, and here it is, Bristol, and you just click OK. And yeah, that's it. So we have it now. So we're specifically only looking at Bristol, and we can see the different age breakdowns in terms of England and Wales. So we start here, 0 to 4. The count for England and Wales was 25,000, and for Somali, 800, and so on and so forth. We've got all of that. So if you wanted to, for example, get like the total just for England and Wales, then and you're working in Excel, you could just do something like sum and then get all of the different counts in there, for example, something, and then like just get the total like that. So you have a lot of different ways once you're in Excel of working with the data itself. So you can get the total and then use that to create a figure or table, for example. So you do like a pie chart breakdown and so forth, so on and so forth. And it's the same method for any of the different tables that you're working with. So as long as they go down to LTLA, you can filter them down to a specific city like Bristol and start to work with them that way. So does that make sense?
Thanks, Rusu. And just to double check, the example data sheet that you're on at the moment, was that from the article and the graphic in that article? You downloaded that table, was it?
It's not from the figure, it was from the underlying table. So it was from just the list of, you come down here, view all data.
Ah, fabulous.
Yeah, it's this
Thank
one,
you.
Agent 6.
And each one of these then is a data set like this one that you just had on screen, and you just need to download it to have a look.
Exactly, yeah.
Excellent, thank you very much. Well, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Kira, is there anything else you'd like to add to that one?
No, I just want to invite people to ask questions as how to use this, because it's really important. I think Abdullah is from Bristol, and I chose Bristol because of that. And he's got his hand up.
Bro, let's have your question, and Abdullah.
Yeah, I wonder whether this data, because I was surprised for some age groups, data in our list is more than some of those were captured on the census. So I wonder how, where the discrepancies are.
What kind of lists do you have, Abdullah?
We are community organization, and we support people. So we record people who come to us. So So, and I'm sure we don't see all the people who live in Bristol, but somehow, yeah, I'm not sure if that is people who, some of them came maybe after 2021 or, you know.
There could be many reasons that census data doesn't necessarily match personal records. All sorts of things to do with the way that we have to clean and put the data together to get these figures, because obviously sometimes we can't count down to certain small geographies and things like that, or certain small groups. I think Lucy mentioned some of the examples of where data has to be restricted so no one's identified. So you've got all of that playing into the totals, but you've also got things like, because this is a snapshot of one day in time, and people would needed to, have to be able to be collected in the data that we're looking at here. People would have needed to identify as Somali in the ethnic group question, I believe. Is that how you grouped the population, Cara and Musu, that particular category?
Yeah, both ethnic group and national identity.
Yeah. So if people put something else, if they maybe chose to identify themselves in a slightly different way, they might have just felt they wanted to put, I don't know, I can't think of any, they could have put anything really. They could have just put Black African, they could have put Black British and not wanted to specify something further. Then we wouldn't know to include them, because when we get the data, because it's anonymized, we are looking at obviously quite black and white categories of people, and if they haven't necessarily, through whatever reasons, not kind of tick that box or identified themselves in the way that is collected in our sample and collected in the way that we've grouped this set of data together, then they'll be in the census somewhere, but they won't necessarily be in this cut of the census. And sometimes that's the kind of trade-off between making sure that it's really anonymous. We can't get that individual record up and like compare it to yours to make sure that that exact person's in there. And the other important thing that we always have to, and we always try and have to bear in mind with this, is that we do take at face value what people have asked on that question, answered on the questionnaire, because we don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. So sometimes you can do things like, I don't know, maybe compare things like languages and countries of birth and things like that to get a bit of a fuller picture of maybe other aspects of the Somali identity that people might have answered if they didn't answer ethnic group. But we won't ever kind of do something that takes people from one group and puts them into another unless they specifically identified that characteristic in their own words, because we don't ever want to kind of put anyone's identity, presume anybody's identity in that way. So yeah, we have to be quite careful about how we put that kind of population together. So there could be all sorts of reasons like that, like how statistics works and how people identify themselves, that mean that our census estimates, our census sample, as it were, is maybe slightly different than your individual kind of records on the ground.
Do you use the administrative data, or are you going to use it in the future?
So there's work particularly around population and migration data to look at how we can improve the population data we produce by using administrative data. So census data itself is just census data. So this is only using census data in this work that Lucy's been talking about, unless we do an article or a piece of research where we specifically say we are combining census data and another form of data, in which case we'll identify it. But anything titled kind of Census 2021 in the big title is usually just using census data itself, and all ONS articles will tell you what data we're using somewhere in them, so you should be able to tell. But census is only one way to get population data. Obviously, it's been very effective and we've done it for a very long time. And what the office is looking at now is what the future of population data could be. And could we improve either things like the frequency, so like how often we we produce population data, as well as things like the detail and the level of granularity and the accuracy and all sorts of things, by using and combining data sources. There's a lot of work going on at ONS at the moment on that exact question. What can we do with linking data sources together? So taking, you know, something like the census data and then something like, I don't know, when we say admin data, we're talking about records that are collected in as part of administrative process to do something else. So taking those and linking the two things together to create like a bigger data set. So there's work going on to kind of try and make sure that we can do something in that space. So you might have seen this summer we had a consultation on our plans in that space, just to see kind of what people thought about the direction that we were going in. And there will be a couple of releases about the kind of how that consultation, what people said in response to it and so on, over kind of early next year and so on. So if it's something that you're interested in, we can make sure we send information through Council of Somali organisations to all of you about this. But a short answer, yes, we're looking at how we can use that more effectively, but it's not in this particular example we're looking at today, which is only census data.
Thank you.
No worries, thank you. Any more questions?
Is there any more questions? Abdurrahman, you had a question? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just, I mean, kind of obvious question, but I think I'm Abdurrahman from Ilays Network. Can I confirm that this data, the local authority and local statutory service providers are updated with this data?
As in, is the data provided to local authorities?
Yes.
Yeah, so as soon as we release this data, we have a part of our team that works for local authorities, and we do let them know that the data has been produced and published. And of course, once it's published, it is open for, you know, the public to use, local authorities, businesses, whoever. So we've let our local authority contacts know. Doesn't necessarily mean every single individual in the LA will know the data's there, but we've certainly done our best to make people aware that it's available, and LAs are very, very welcome to come and use the data, as is everybody else. So yeah, it's there for them to use as well as yourselves.
Thank you.
No problem. Of course, if anyone thinks of any questions after the session, because I know we've just thrown a fair amount of information at you, and I'm sure you want to go and actually use the data and things that we've talked about, do feel free to get in touch either via Council of Somali Organisations or the email on screen at the moment. So that's outreach.engagement.community@ons.gov.uk, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions that come through later. And